Hi, Ellie here from the Dark Imp. Today I'm going to show you how to play Castaway. Castaway is one of our roll and write games that comes on a placemat. On the other side is Beach Life, and there is a different video showing you how to play that. Castaway can be played with any number of players 2 upwards. Everybody will need their own placemat and a pen or pencil, and then you're going to use 2 dice for all the players. If you're playing online, you can use virtual dice. At the start of each turn, someone rolls the dice. I'm going to re-roll because I don't want a 6 yet. Okay, so we've got a 3, 4. The roll of the dice indicates which section of your island you can use. One of the dice shows the row and the other shows the column. You can choose which is which, and it can differ on each turn. And you can make a different decision from the other players in the game. So in this roll, I can either do something in this square, 4, 3, or something in this square, 4, 3. Okay, 3, 4, 4, 3. So these 2 squares are up for grabs. There are 5 different actions I can take. I can fell a tree. That means I'm going to cross out one of the trees on the island in that particular space. And I'm going to tick one of the trees on the project board. That means that I'm getting a project ready. I've cut down the tree. I've used all the wood getting ready for one of these projects. That's all I do. I can't use the project. That's a different action. I just chop down the tree and tick it on the project board wherever I want. The second action is to sink a shipwreck. Now I can't do that in 4-3, but if I had one of these C squares, if I had 5-1, for example, 1-5, I could cross off this shipwreck. I'm going to take all the nets from that shipwreck. I'm sinking it, and I'm going to tick the shipwreck in the nets section of the project board. That's the second action. So we've got fell a tree and sink a shipwreck. The third action you can take is to build a project. Now, if you've got one of these boxes completely full, for example, in a windmill, you just need to create one windmill, you just need to chop down one tree. So you'll tick this, and then as soon as this whole section is ticked, that's just one section, then you're going to be able to create the windmill on your project board. So if you have something that looks like this, a tick here in the windmill section, then on your turn, if you've rolled 4-3, for example, you can choose to use this windmill that we've got ready and draw it on the island in this section. So I've decided I'm going to do that. So I'm going to put a circle around that to show I've used it. And in this place here, I'm going to draw a windmill. There we go. Beautifully drawn, I'm sure you'll agree. So that's the third thing you can do. Now, if you're going to use wood for a shelter or a bird hide or the SOS, you need to have all 3 in the shelter or 2 in the bird hide or 2 in the SOS before you can build the project. So we've got fell a tree, sink a shipwreck, which I can't say, and build a project. The fourth action you can do is to plant a tree. So if you're using 4-3, for example, you can just draw your own new little tree. There we are, a nice little palm tree. Or you can launch a message in a bottle. Now you can only do this in C squares. Oh, sorry, for the plant a tree action, you've got to be next to another tree. You have to be adjacent to another tree and not diagonally. So I could do it here because I've got trees around me. Launch a message in a bottle. You're going to do that in an empty C space that's next to a shipwreck. So if I got 5-5, I could draw a sort of message in a bottle here. I could launch a message in a bottle here. So those are your 5 possible actions on your turn. And what you're going to do, you'll make decisions based on how you're trying to score points and what you want the end game condition to be. We'll come on to that in a minute. The other thing you need to know is if you throw a 6, that's like a wild dice. That means you can choose any row or column for a 6. So if we had a 6-3, we'd have to do one of these squares here or one of these squares here. But you can choose any on the intersections of the 3. So on the 3 column and the 3 row. If you want, at some point during the game, you can change a dice that has been rolled by summoning a storm. So 5 different points during the game, you can change your roll to a 6, which makes it wild. So if I really wanted a 6/6, or if I really wanted to do something in a different place, I could change this 3 by crossing this box off here, and that would mean that I've got a 6/6. And I don't actually change the dice because that would confuse other people, but I know I've got 6/6. If you can't do anything on your roll, you're going to have to cross off one of these flares. You're letting off an emergency flare, and you're going to get -5 points at the end of the game for each flare you let off. Now, there are 3 different ways of ending the game. The game ends when one player meets one of these 3 conditions. Either they're self-sustained, they've become self-sustained, and the conditions for that are that you built both of your shelters on the island, and that you've cast all 6 of your available nets. It's somewhere in the sea. If you've done those 2 things, you're self-sustained. That doesn't necessarily mean you win, because the person who wins the game, which is all over here in this corner, is the person who has the highest score. And at the end of the game, after somebody's finished the game, each player will count up what they've got and work out what their score is. The second way you can end the game is if you are rescued. You get rescued by building all 6 lighthouses, and 4 of them need to be in these little squares at the corners where the crosses are. There are 4 little red crosses. If you manage to get 4 of your lighthouses there and 4 in other valid places, the other 2 in valid places, then you've got all 6 lighthouses out. But you also, to get rescued, you need to build your giant SOS. That needs to go on a land space that is completely cleared of trees and buildings around it so that it can be seen. The third way that somebody could end the game is by being abandoned. You're abandoned if you've let off all 3 flares. And remember, the game finishes for everybody straight away as soon as one player meets all 3 conditions. Now, scoring. All these different things that you put in your island will score in different ways. And the scoring is shown next to all the different items down the right-hand side. So, for example, for every tree that you've got on your island, whether you've drawn it or whether it was there at the beginning of the game, you get 1 point for. Any trees that you have crossed off to use for wood somewhere else, that does not count. That tree has been felled, so you do not count those trees that have been crossed off. So you'll get points for those, and they go here. Then you're going to count all the messages in a bottle that you've launched around in the sea, and each one of them gives you 1 point. Then you're going to count your nets. Your nets give you more points if they're next to each other. So, for example, if you've got a net here and a net here, that's going to be 2 nets together, and that'll give you 3 points. If you've got another net here, that's 3 nets together, and that will give you 6 points. If you manage to get all 6 nets connected, let's say like this, then you're going to get a whopping 21 points, which you're going to put in this little box. Your shelters give you 3 points for every other building that's in the 8 squares surrounding a shelter. So, for example, if I have a little shelter here, I'm not very good at drawing shelters, there we are, a little shelter here, and you've got let's say you've got a bird hide here, and you've got a windmill here, then you're going to score 3 points for this building and 3 points for this building. And it says which things count as buildings just on the project board there. So that would give you 6 points. You count each shelter separately. So if you've got another shelter with more buildings around it, you count that as well. The bird hides, they give you points for how many trees they have around them. So you get 1 point for each tree that is in the 8 spaces around a bird hide. So this one will give us 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And you're going to write that down. You could have 3 bird hides. They could all give you points. Windmills score you 4 points, but only if they're next to another windmill. So right now I've got 2 windmills and they would score me 0. If I had another windmill here, then these 2 windmills would each score me 3 points, so I'd get 6 points in total. Sorry, they would each score me 4 points, I'd get 8 points in total. Lighthouses score 4 points each, but only if they're next to a shipwreck which has not been sunk. So that's my lighthouse. Terrible lighthouse. I'll do some light coming out of it. That looks a bit better. So if I've got a lighthouse here and it's next to a shipwreck which is not sunk, remember you have to sink shipwrecks to get nets. That's the B action. So your lighthouse will score 4 points if it's next to a shipwreck which has not been sunk. Your SOS counts for 6 points, but only if you are rescued. So if you've built an SOS and someone else gets self-sustained or rescued or abandoned before you've had a chance to finish the game, your SOS scores you no points. At the end of the game, you subtract all the flares that you've let off, so you subtract 5 points for each flare, and you total up all of these and subtract your flares, and that gives you a total score. The one with the most wins. So that's Castaway.